What's up? I'm Coach Ryan Family from the Fat Loss Solution, and today I've got another edition of Ask Coach Ryan. Today's question came from Paul Langley, and the question is, can you gain muscle carb cycling instead of bulking? Now, first off, I realize I run a fat loss blog, but muscle building and fat loss go hand in hand, okay, for a couple reasons. First off, a lot of people see their best muscle gains after they come off of a fat loss cycle of training and nutrition. Okay, and second of all, it's because muscle gains and fat loss results both depend on insulin sensitivity for effectiveness. So insulin sensitivity basically describes your body's ability to use carbohydrates effectively. So when you're insulin sensitive, your carbs go towards fueling your workouts, fueling your brain, and refilling muscle glycogen stores. All good stuff. When you're insulin resistant, those carbs that you eat go towards fat cells. Okay, and insulin sensitivity, again, is a sliding scale that depends largely on how much body fat you have. So someone who's 5% body fat is going to be more insulin sensitive and use their carbs more effectively than someone who's 25% body fat. Okay, now the old school way of gaining muscle, and when I say old school, I'm talking about the early 90s bodybuilders. Makes me sound old talking about the 90s, but the old school way of gaining muscle was to go through phases of bulking and then cutting. So in bulking phases, basically they just operated with their mouth like it was a vacuum. They'd eat anything that was in sight, doesn't matter if it was good for you or bad. They'd make sure to get a ton of quality protein in. But the four main food groups of a bulking cycle are McDonald's, Wendy's, Burger King, and Waffle House. All right, those are the four food groups of a bulking cycle. And so this concept is still around today, believe it or not. I see guys in the gym all the time just shoving anything down their gullet and what are you doing? Oh, I'm bulking, bro. Okay, whatever, that's fine. I kind of nod my head and move on. And then basically after this period of bulking, there's a period of cutting where they then shed all their body fat to show a six-pack with supposedly a ton of new muscle from their bulking phase. Now, this process, in my opinion, sucks for a couple reasons. First off, it actually doesn't work that great, okay? So both in research and in what I've seen with a lot of people that have done it, it doesn't actually result in that much more muscle mass. So you see people that gain 50 pounds of muscle in the not 50 pounds of muscle. They gain 50 pounds in the off season, and then when they diet down for their show, they may only be 3 to 5 pounds heavier than they were the first time around. Well, you can gain 3 to 5 pounds of muscle without turning yourself into a fat slob, okay? Just needs to be done more gradually and over time. Okay, the next reason, and this is a huge one of why I do not like the bulking and cutting methodology, is because once you create fat cells, they never go away. You can shrink them, but you can't actually get rid of them. So I'm going to pick an arbitrary number here. Let's say you have 100 fat cells and you just want to get jacked before you go to the beach next summer. So you go through a 5-month bulking phase and you eat whatever you see in sight and you train hard, still got to train hard. But those 100 fat cells then become 200 fat cells. Yes, you've put on some weight, the scale's going up, you're getting stronger in the gym, so that's all good. But now when it comes time to shed that fat, you've got an additional 100 fat cells. Yes, you can shrink them, okay? You can still get that six-pack for the gym, but you will always gain fat easier in the future because you added those fat cells. So if you've been fat once, you can get fat again much more rapidly than someone who's never been fat. So that's a big caution against the bulking and cutting methodology that I don't like. The next reason I don't like it is because of health problems, all right? If you eat like crap all the time and you eat an excess of calories and you don't eat quality foods, things like blood pressure is going to go up, your liver is going to function poorly, the fraction of cholesterols are going to get skewed. Now, cholesterol by itself isn't always a concern, but the fractions can get out of whack, which is a big concern. So you don't want to be unhealthy just to look good. It doesn't make sense to tear your body up on the inside to look good on the outside. Okay, so that's another reason. And then finally, arguably one of the most important, if you train because you want to look good, why on earth would you want to look like a bag of crap, like a fat, sloppy sack, like someone stuffed 20 pounds of fat in a 3-pound sack? Why would you want to look like that for 40 weeks a year, only to look good 12 weeks a year? Wouldn't it be better to just gradually add muscle and maintain your aesthetic look as you went? That's what I think is best, but what do I know? Anyway, This is not now when I warn against bulking and cutting, this is not to say that when you're trying to put on muscle, you can't allow some body fat to accumulate. But you have to keep in mind that as your fat goes up, your insulin sensitivity goes down. So if you allow yourself to get fat, then those carbs that you eat to try to put on muscle will get preferentially stored in fat cells. Okay, so that is a huge problem, and that's why you don't want to allow yourself to get too fat. I tend to like to have people, if it's bodybuilding or photo shoot, things like that, I tend to not like to have people go above 12% body fat when trying to put on muscle mass. Okay, so what's the solution? What do you do if you want to put on muscle mass but you don't want to get out of shape? Well, as Paul asked in this question, I tend to like carb cycling or macronutrient rotation. For those of you guys that have purchased my fat loss solution program, you know that Macro Rotate is one of the meal plans in there, and it can be used for both fat loss and muscle gains. And the principles are the same, it's just a little slightly different how you do it in terms of with muscle mass, you're going to have greater overall calories. If you're trying to put on muscle, you're going to have greater overall calories, greater overall carbs, and probably a higher frequency of high carbohydrate days. But the principles remain the same. First off, protein should be held relatively constant. Okay, it doesn't matter whether you're trying to gain muscle, if you're trying to lose body fat, you need a lot of protein in your diet. No one ever got jacked or lean by not getting enough protein. So that's important, and that stays relatively constant. Next, fat and carbohydrates need to fluctuate in opposition to one another. And what this does two things for us. First of all, it allows us to keep overall calorie levels fairly stable, which is important because you can't really track your progress well if you're having crazy shifts and spikes in your calorie intake. The second thing that it does is it allows us to take a targeted approach to the timing of hormones at certain times. So for example, in a high carbohydrate day, so a high carbohydrate, lower fat day, the goal of that day is to spike insulin as much as possible. And when you spike insulin as much as possible, you put your body in an anabolic state. Anabolic means building, so that is a muscle building state. So a good day to be in a muscle building state is when you've got a hard workout planned. So if you have a hard leg day, it's a good idea to be in a muscle building state for that leg day so that you can recover from your exercise and pack on lean tissue once you're done, okay? Other days, if you have a couple days off where you're not doing anything, you may want to have a lower carb, higher fat day. And what this does, again, it stabilizes the calories so that you can still grow, because you do need calories to grow. You're not going to grow in a massive calorie deficit. So it stabilizes calories, but then it minimizes insulin response so that you don't get the building hormones when you are not active for the day, okay? If you're just sitting around, typically, I don't want to say never, okay? I don't like to use the word never, but if you're just sitting around, you typically don't want insulin to be high on those days. Because again, insulin's a building hormone. It builds muscle, but it also increases fat cells, okay? Or increases the carbohydrate drive to fat cells, I should say. Another principle of carbohydrate cycling or macronutrient rotation is that you rotate between high carb days, low carb days, and medium carb days. And again, fat fluctuates in opposition to one another. So I prefer the term macronutrient rotation rather than carb cycling, because you're also cycling fats, and you could even cycle protein to an extent if you wanted to. Now, muscle gain versus fat loss. It's very individualized in how you approach your program. So if your goal is to gain a lot of muscle and you've been lean, you may have a lot of high carb days in your plan. If your goal is to lose body fat, you may only have one high carb day per week. You may have one high carb day per 2 weeks. It's all very individual. Also, if you're a skinny guy who struggles to put on muscle, you may have 5 high carb days a week. I've had that before. I've had clients that have been actually not macronutrient rotate at all, but just pretty much high carb, low fat days all the time. Clean foods, of course, so that it's not a true bulking phase. But if you really are lean and very, very skinny, you might need a lot more calories, okay? Let's converse that with the fact, if you are an FFB or a former fat boy, and just for the first time, like in your entire life, you just discovered your 6-pack. It finally came through, and now you want to put on some more muscle mass. going straight to 3 to 4 to 5 high carb days in a week is not for you. You need to start with a low amount of carbs. So start with maybe just adding some post-workout carbs, or having one high carb day a week. Run that for a few weeks, assess how your body's responding, and then go from there, okay? Now, where you place your days with carb cycling or macronutrient rotation depends on your training schedule. So some people do really well putting their high carb meals or days the day prior to their hardest or most demanding sessions. So your leg day, your squat day. Other people prefer to put their high carb days on the day of their most demanding sessions. And this is what I tend to do best with. For me personally, is if I'm having a high carb day or a series of high carb days, I'll put it on my most demanding training sessions for that week. That's how I function best. It may be how you function best, but it may not be, and that's totally okay. Other people actually, and what I find is very, very lean individuals tend to do best putting their high carb days on their actually off days when they are sitting around the couch. And that's why I don't use the word never when I said that earlier. It's because for those people, if you're naturally skinny, you're naturally lean, it's good to have high insulin on an off day so that you can recover. So, it's going to require some tinkering on your part to play around and see what gets results, but always measure your results. So try something, implement it, measure it. That's how you know if it works, and that's how you know how to proceed from there. Okay, and then finally, the last principle is change it when you need to. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So if you're going 2 high carb days a week, 2 medium carb days a week, and 3 low carb days a week, and you're getting great results, there's no need to change just for the sake of change. Wait until you hit a plateau and then start tinkering a little bit. You could, if your goal is to gain muscle mass and you're running 2 high carb days a week and you're making great gains, and then all of a sudden you stop and you hit a plateau, your next step could be to take out a medium day and replace it with another high carb day. That would be one way of changing. Then you monitor that for a few weeks, check and see your progress, see how you do, and make adjustments. Okay, it's a constant tinkering process. There's no one set way to do it for everyone. Okay, and hopefully I cleared that up more than I confused you, but the fact of the matter is everyone's different and it requires a lot of tinkering. So that's it for this edition of Ask Coach Ryan regarding carb cycling and muscle building. See you next time.